If your own family signed a DNR on you for $20 million, what would you do? That question is the only reason I am alive today. It stayed with me while I drifted in and out of darkness, caught between the sharp smell of antiseptic and the cold metal taste of fear. My name is Madeline Carter, but everyone calls me Maddie, and I never imagined the people who raised me would stand over my hospital bed and decide whether I deserved to live. The night it happened, I was driving north on Interstate 25, heading back to my apartment in Denver after a long day of interviews. The wind outside was rough, the kind that shakes the highway signs and makes the mountains look like dark silhouettes against a violent sky. I remember tightening my grip on the wheel, thinking I should have left work earlier. The last thing I saw was a pair of headlights coming straight at me, not drifting, not swerving, but locking on like a guided missile. A pickup truck crossed the median and slammed into my driver's side. The metal screamed. My ribs cracked. My skull hit the window. The world went white, then disappeared. They said later the driver fled. They said later the truck was a rental. They said later the rental was paid for with a credit card under my brother's name. But that part comes afterward. In those first hours, I was nothing but a broken body in an ICU bay at Denver General Hospital, hooked to machines that kept my lungs moving in that stubborn rhythm between life and death. I could not speak. I could not lift a finger. But I could hear. People think coma patients are unconscious in every sense. That is not always true. I floated in a half-dream, half-nightmare where voices were muffled but recognizable. The beeps of the heart monitor pulsed like someone tapping a distant drum. Nurses whispered. Shoes scuffed the tile. And then I heard them. My family. My mother's voice came first, sharp as glass. "How long is this going to take?" A sigh, impatient and cold. My father's voice followed. Richard Carter always spoke like every sentence was an inconvenience. "The doctor said she is stable for now." Then my brother. "Ethan." His tone was low-controlled, dangerous in its calm. "Mom, Dad, just leave it alone. She will not last. We need the money." I tried to scream. My body did not move. I tried to open my eyes. Nothing. The machines hummed while my own family discussed my death. A DNR is a do not resuscitate order. It tells the hospital not to revive you if your heart stops. It is usually something families agonize over when someone is truly gone. Except I was not gone. I was 32, healthy, strong, and according to the ICU neurologist, had a very high probability of recovery. The doctors had told them that. I remember the voice of Dr. Priya Devi, my attending physician. She had a calm, warm tone even in the coldest moments. Her words filtered into the fog around me. She has a significant concussion and several injuries, but her brain responses are strong. Prognosis is good with treatment. With treatment, not without it. I had a 70% chance of fully recovering if they approved the recommended protocol. But instead of listening, my mother snapped. "What are the costs of that? How long would it take?" My father muttered something about hospital bills and deductibles, and Ethan, always the golden child, leaned closer to my bed. His voice dropped to a whisper, but I still heard every word. She would not want to live like this. She told me that once. 100% lie. I had never said anything like that in my life. Dr. Devi pushed back. "There is no medical reason to discuss a DNR at this time. Absolutely none. My father said we need to be realistic. She might not come back fully. We should think about quality of life." Quality of life. That phrase is always used by people who have no intention of giving you any. Ethan said it again. "Just leave it alone. She will not make it. We need the money." That sentence played over and over like a broken recording. I wanted to open my eyes so badly. I wanted to sit up. I wanted to rip the tubes out and ask them how they could stand there and weigh my life against a payout. But my body was frozen under the haze of sedation, and all I could do was listen as the people who raised me tried to erase me. Somewhere at the edge of my awareness, I heard Dr. Devi's voice again. Firm. Angry. "If you want to discuss documentation, we can schedule an ethics consult, but I am not signing a DNR for a patient with this prognosis. Not today, not tomorrow, not unless the medical condition truly justifies it." I could almost sense my mother's scowl. "We will talk to another doctor. one who understands what the family wants. That was when I felt it, the surge inside me, the rising fire. They thought I was gone. They thought I was deaf to their plans. They thought $20 million was worth more than my heartbeat. They were wrong. I could not open my eyes that night, but I made myself a promise in the darkness. I will survive this, and I will make every single one of them answer for what they tried to do. People think betrayal begins with a single moment, a sudden rupture, one catastrophic choice that reveals who someone truly is. But my story did not begin in that ICU room. It began decades earlier in a small sun-baked neighborhood on the outskirts of Colorado Springs, in a house with peeling white paint, a sagging porch, and a family that looked normal enough from the outside. From the street, the Carters appeared ordinary. My father, Richard, owned a small auto shop. My mother, Marla, worked part-time at a dental office. My brother, Ethan, played football and charmed every adult in sight. I was the quiet one who hid behind library books and crept around the edges of arguments. Nobody outside ever questioned why I walked so softly or why my shoulders curled inward as if preparing for impact. They simply thought I was shy. I learned early that in our home, love was conditional, unpredictable, and sometimes violent. My father was the first storm I ever knew. He had a temper that could go from stillness to a hurricane without warning. When he gambled away the mortgage payment, he blamed me. When he lost money on his truck auctions, he blamed me. When his favorite football team missed the playoffs, he blamed me. He once threw a beer can at my head when I was 9 and shouted that I was a curse. His favorite phrase was, "You are the reason everything goes wrong." At 12, he grabbed my arm so hard that I had bruises shaped like fingerprints for a week because I refused to lie to a debt collector on the phone. My mother was different, but not kinder. She had a cold, surgical sort of cruelty. She controlled everything in that house, from what we wore to how many sips of milk we were allowed to finish. She demanded perfection from me, but never from my brother. She hit me with silence far more often than with her hands, but when she did touch me, it left marks. At 13, she yanked my hair so hard, a small patch tore out because I forgot to switch the laundry. At 14, she shoved my shoulder against the hallway wall hard enough to leave a dent and told me I needed to toughen up because the world was not built for weak girls. Her words cut deeper than her hands ever did. When I cried, she said I was being dramatic. When I succeeded, she called it luck. When I failed, she called it proof. But the worst part was Ethan, my older brother by 2 years. The golden child who could do no wrong. Teachers adored him. Neighbors trusted him. My parents worshipped him, and he knew it. He used that power like a weapon. When I was 10, he stole $50 from my piggy bank and told our parents I had spent it on candy. They grounded me for a month. When I was 12, he broke a vase and told my mother I knocked it over. She slapped me so hard, my ears rang. When I was 14, he pushed me down the stairs during an argument about the television remote. I tumbled the entire way until my shoulder struck the bottom landing. I writhed in pain while Ethan told our parents it was an accident. He said I slipped. My father believed him instantly. My mother told me to stop being clumsy. The result was a dislocated shoulder and a quiet hatred that settled into my bones. That was the day I learned that pain, even obvious and physical, meant nothing in a house determined to see me as the problem. As I grew older, the abuse took financial form. My father racked up more gambling losses. My mother took out small loans she had no intention of repaying. Ethan, who had inherited Richard's appetite for risk, accumulated credit card debt so fast the statements looked like fiction. When their finances collapsed, they turned to me. At 16, they forced me to hand over my part-time job paychecks. At 17, they pressured me to co-sign a loan for Ethan by telling me that family loyalty mattered more than anything. At 18, my father stole money directly from my checking account after memorizing my PIN. They justified everything as family necessity. They said I owed them. They said they deserved it. They said I should be grateful they raised me at all. That was the moment I first understood that family is not defined by blood. Sometimes blood is nothing more than the first chain you learn to break. I left the day after I turned 18. I packed everything I owned into a trash bag because they refused to buy me a suitcase. I stayed with a friend for a few months before moving to Denver. I worked full-time, slept little, and built my life inch by inch, fighting through the exhaustion of someone who had never known safety. But I was good at seeing patterns. I was good at understanding lies. I was good at reading people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. Pain had become a skill set. That is how I became an investigator for a major insurance company. My specialty became fraud detection. I was excellent at it because I had grown up around manipulators. I learned to track money trails because I had once tracked the missing dollars from my own accounts. I learned to interpret tone shifts because I had learned to read my father's anger before he threw things. I learned to document meticulously because evidence was the only thing that had ever protected me. After years of hard work, my company rewarded me with a life insurance policy worth $20 million. It was a retention program meant for senior investigators, a promise that if anything happened, our families would be taken care of. It felt like security. It felt like independence. It felt like something no one could take from me. I did not know that Ethan had found a way to get into my records. I did not know he had manipulated beneficiary paperwork when I was 21 and too inexperienced to question why HR was asking for repeated signatures. He listed my parents and himself as beneficiaries instead of the neutral trust I intended. When the company implemented a new system years later, the old files were imported exactly as they were. And so the payout attached itself to the people who had spent my entire childhood hurting me. Looking back, it was never a coincidence. My family had been circling me for years like vultures waiting for the body to stop moving. I escaped them physically, but I never realized their hands still reached for me financially. When the accident happened, everything snapped into place. The rental truck, the force of the impact, the silence after. And then the sentence that echoed through the ICU. Just leave it alone. She will not last. We need the money. The truth is that betrayal did not start in that dark hospital room. It started in a house where love was rationed, violence was normal, and I was raised to believe my life had less value than everyone else's. I survived that house. I survived them once. Now I would survive again, and this time I would expose every one of them. The official reports said it was a tragic collision, a freak accident on a windy Colorado night. That was the phrase repeated in the first police briefing. A freak accident. But nothing about that night felt accidental, not the alignment of events, not the timing, and definitely not the details that began to surface once investigators dug deeper. When I eventually woke fully in the ICU, still tethered to machines and fighting through a fog of pain and medication, Dr. Priya Devi sat beside my bed with a calm expression that barely hid the tension in her eyes. She asked one careful question. Maddie, do you remember anything unusual before the crash? Her voice carried an edge that told me she already suspected something. I tried to speak, but my throat felt like sandpaper. All I managed was a whisper. Headlights. She leaned in, coming towards you, straight at me. She nodded slowly as if confirming a private theory. Hours later, when the police officer assigned to the case came by, he confirmed what she already knew. The truck that hit you did not drift. It corrected its steering twice before impact. That is not consistent with loss of control. It means the driver aimed. Aimed. That word sank into me like ice. The officer lowered his voice and explained that the truck was a rental from a company on the south side of Colorado Springs. The rental agreement listed a prepaid fuel package. The customer had used a specific credit card. The name on the card was Ethan Carter. At first, my brain refused to believe it. Ethan had always been cruel, but attempted homicide felt like a different realm altogether. But the officer continued. The rental was picked up 3 hours before the accident. Ethan's phone pinged near the rental agency that same afternoon, and then came the detail that made my stomach twist. Every traffic camera along the stretch of interstate where the crash happened had malfunctioned within the same 10-minute window. The city reviewed the logs. It looked like remote interference or a deliberate blackout. Nothing coincidental. The officer did not accuse outright, but he did not need to. His tone said everything. We are treating this as suspicious. If the treacherous mechanical silence on that stretch of highway had not already convinced me, the medical findings did. My injuries were serious, but nowhere near fatal. I had a concussion, 2 fractured ribs, a fractured wrist, and bruising along my torso from the seat belt. Painful? Yes. Life-threatening? No. Dr. Devi told me directly that I had an excellent chance of recovery with proper treatment. She even said the words that stuck with me most. There is absolutely no medical justification for discussing a DNR for someone in your condition. None. Which meant my family had pushed for my death not out of mercy or fear, but out of convenience. As the days unfolded, the irregularities stacked higher. A nurse at the ICU, a woman named Janine, came to me when my parents stepped out for coffee. She whispered the moment the door shut. Your family insisted on meeting with the hospital ethics department within hours of you arriving. They asked to review DNR options before we even finished your initial scans. She paused, tightening her grip on the chart she held. I have seen families panic. I have seen them terrified, but I have never seen anyone push that hard that early. I wanted to thank her, but my voice still came out thin and rasped. I managed a soft, "Why?" She hesitated, then said the thing that made my blood run cold. They said you told them you never wanted to live if you could not run again. I stared at her, confused and angry. What? Janine pressed her lips together and nodded. They said you told them you would rather die than be dependent. That is not true, I whispered. Not even close. She placed her hand gently on mine. I did not believe them, and neither did your doctor. That is why she insisted on delaying any ethics meeting until she could complete assessments. And that is why the hospital still has not approved a DNR. The web was tightening, and my family knew it. That became clear when my mother returned to my bedside, her purse slung over her shoulder like she was stopping by a grocery store instead of visiting her critically injured daughter. She leaned down and whispered in my ear, believing I was still unable to hear or comprehend. You are making this harder than it needs to be. We are only doing what is best for everyone. Best for everyone. She meant best for them. My father arrived later with a manila folder that he kept flipping through nervously. I recognized the medical consent forms even before he opened it. He muttered to Ethan, who stood near the corner of the room, pretending not to listen. If we do not get this done soon, the window closes. Ethan whispered back, She is not going anywhere. She will not last another day without complications. Keep pushing. I devoured every word in silence, pretending to doze my eyes at half-mast while my mind sharpened like a blade. The next visitor was the financial representative from the insurance company. He had called earlier to verify my policy information and left a voicemail when he thought I was too sedated to understand. Your family contacted us regarding your life insurance policy. They are requesting information on processing a potential claim. A claim. They were beginning the paperwork before doctors even cleared me to drink water. By then, Dr. Devi had pieced together enough to raise alarms. She sat beside me that evening and spoke in a low voice. Your family gave contradictory statements about your wishes and your health history, and the urgency they are showing is concerning. I need to warn you. If they succeed in pressuring the hospital for a DNR, there is a chance someone outside this unit might sign it. I wanted to sit up. I wanted to shout. I wanted to fight, but my body still felt like concrete held together with pain and wires. Dr. Devi leaned closer, lowering her voice further. I need you to stay still and stay silent for now. If they think you are weak, they will slip. If they believe you cannot respond, they will reveal more. She was right. My silence became my weapon. Over the next 24 hours, my family continued to visit, whispering, arguing, planning. Ethan checked the machines. My mother repeated the same lie about my supposed wish to die if I could not live perfectly. My father kept asking nurses about the legal timeline of DNR decisions, and every detail lined up with the same truth. None of them expected me to survive. All of them benefited if I did not. The pattern was clear, the motive undeniable, the timing deliberate. The accident was no accident. It was a plan, and I was never meant to wake up, but I did. The morning I finally opened my eyes fully, the world came back in fragments. A sharp beep from the heart monitor, the faint scent of antiseptic, a soft draft from the ceiling vent brushing across my cheek. My eyelashes fluttered, and for a moment I thought the brightness around me was just another hallucination. Then the blur sharpened, and I realized I was staring at the ceiling tiles of Denver General's ICU. I lay completely still, my breath shallow, my chest aching with every inhale. My body felt like it had been rebuilt from broken glass and heavy cement, but my mind was awake, clear, sharp, and terrified. Footsteps echoed from the hallway, quick and deliberate. I recognized that stride instantly. Dr. Priya Devi entered my room with a clipboard in hand, her eyes scanning the machines. She paused mid-step when she saw my open eyes. Her expression flickered from surprise to relief to something far more serious. She set the clipboard down and leaned close, speaking in a low voice. "Maddie, can you hear me?" I blinked once. Her eyes widened slightly and she leaned closer. "Do not move anything. Do not speak yet. Your family is in the hallway, and they do not know you are awake." My pulse spiked slightly and the machine responded with a sharp uptick. Dr. Devi placed her hand gently on my wrist. I know you want to talk, but listen carefully." She lowered her voice even more, glancing toward the partially closed door. "They pushed the hospital to consider a DNR. The only reason it was not approved was because your neurological responses remained stable. If they know you are improving, they will change tactics. You need to stay quiet until we understand what they are planning." Her words settled into me like cold steel. I blinked again, slower this time. She nodded. "Good. That means you understand. Do not react when they touch you. Do not respond if they talk. Stay still. Pretend you cannot hear or understand anything. I will handle the medical team. Just trust me." Trust! I was not sure I had trusted anyone in years, but something about her tone made me cling to the possibility. The door opened and Dr. Devi straightened immediately, her entire posture shifting into calm professionalism. My mother stepped inside first, her perfume floating in like a wall of artificial sweetness. She carried herself like she was entering a room that inconvenienced her. My father followed with a slow shuffle, glancing around as if someone might judge him for being there. Ethan walked in last. His quiet confidence filled the room the way a predator fills a cave. I forced my eyes to unfocus slightly, letting them drift in that detached way I had seen in other patients recovering from trauma. My mother studied my face and clicked her tongue. Still nothing. "She sounds disappointed," Dr. Devi said. "My job is to support her medical recovery. Whether you approve of her pace is irrelevant." My mother shot the doctor a glare before turning back to me. She leaned over my bed and whispered, thinking I was trapped inside some foggy abyss. "You are dragging this out, I will be honest." "It is exhausting." I let my eyes drift away from her, the slow, unfocused movement of someone half aware. Ethan came to my bedside next. He pinched the inside of my arm through the blanket, hard, deliberate, testing. I did not flinch. My skin burned, but I kept my breath even. He smirked. "Nothing, just like I thought." My father moved closer, rubbing his jaw. "We should ask again about the DNR. If she cannot respond after all this time, then what is the point?" 36 hours, Dr. Devi said with clipped precision. "She has been awake neurologically for 36 hours, not 36 days. Recovery varies." She directed her gaze to my father. "And I am telling you again that there is no clinical justification for a DNR." My father muttered under his breath, "There will be a justification soon enough." I felt a chill race across my spine. Ethan reached toward the oxygen cannula resting across my face and tugged it gently. Not enough to disconnect it, but enough to tighten it uncomfortably around my cheek. He watched for a reaction. I gave him none. "Good girl," he whispered. "Stay quiet. It will be over soon." My mother patted my hand in a mock gesture of comfort, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "We are doing what is best for the family. You would understand if you were thinking clearly." She brushed her fingers against my cheek as if wiping away a tear that was not there. I fought every instinct in my body not to recoil. Dr. Devi stepped forward, then her tone firm. "I need you all to step out now. The patient needs rest. We have to adjust her medication." My mother lifted her chin. "We are not done talking to her." The doctor's response was immediate. "You have been talking. She cannot. Please step outside before I call hospital security." The look on Marla's face told me she was not used to being challenged. But after a tense pause, she turned sharply and exited. My father followed, muttering. Ethan lingered a second longer, staring at me as if he were trying to see through my skull. Finally, he left. When the door shut, my chest caved inward with a shaky breath. The machine beeped sharply. I tried controlling it, but the fear clawed at me. Dr. Devi immediately placed her hand on my shoulder. Slow breaths. You did well. They do not suspect a thing. I blinked in response. She nodded approvingly. Good. Now listen. I have documented everything they said. I have informed the nursing staff to keep a close eye whenever your family is here, and I have requested a sitter to remain outside your room. She paused. But we need more than medical records. We need evidence they cannot deny. She opened her pocket and took out a small recording device about the size of a thumb drive. A friend of mine in the legal department said this is permitted as long as it is for your protection and does not interfere with medical equipment. I will place it under your mattress edge. It will capture anyone who speaks near your bed. I blinked again, slowly and deliberately. Relief washed over me. For the first time since the crash, I felt a shred of control returning. When she finished hiding the device, she looked at me with a level of seriousness that made my skin prickle. Maddie, your family did not just consider letting you die. They are trying to create the conditions for it. You cannot give them any sign that you are recovering. Not yet. I let my eyelids lower halfway again, retreating behind the mask of a silent, helpless patient. The role disgusted me, but I needed it. My silence was my shield. My stillness was my strategy. My family thought I was gone a body waiting to be signed off. They believed they could twist my fate with a pen stroke. They had no idea I was listening to every word, and I was ready to fight. I spent the next day drifting in and out of awareness, pretending not to process the footsteps, whispers, and shadows that passed through my ICU doorway. Every time my mother's perfume reached me, or Ethan's low muttering drifted toward my bed, I kept my eyes half closed and my body loose. The recording device beneath the mattress edge captured every word they spoke, every lie they rehearsed, every frustrated sigh when my condition refused to match the story they were pushing. By mid-afternoon, the room had settled into a quiet lull. The machines hummed their mechanical rhythm, and sunlight from the high windows cast long beams across the floor. I was in the middle of forcing myself into another convincing stillness when a new voice entered the room. Deep calm, measured. My name is Toby Hale. I froze inwardly. I had heard the ICU nurses mention a lawyer who kept calling someone who insisted on checking my patient status. Until now, I had no idea who he was. I felt the mattress shift slightly as someone approached my bedside. I kept my eyes unfocused, my breathing slow. Toby exhaled softly, almost a sigh of relief. So she is conscious? I just knew it. His whisper carried a certainty that pulled a thread of hope through me. Dr. Devi stepped into view. She kept her voice low. We must be careful. Her family comes in and out constantly. They cannot know she is responding. Toby nodded. I figured as much. That is why I did not call her family directly. A coworker of hers contacted me, said she trusted me more than anyone else in Denver. I felt a subtle tightening in my chest. A coworker. I could guess who. Angela from my fraud analysis unit always said she had a bad feeling about my family. I used to laugh it off. Now it felt like she had saved my life. Toby sat down in the chair beside me, and though I tried not to react, I felt the mattress dip slightly with his presence. He spoke gently, knowing I could hear him even if I could not respond. My name is Toby Hale. I am a defense and fraud attorney. I know you cannot show it, but if you understand me, just keep your breathing steady. I inhaled through the cannula slowly and let the air out with control. Good. Here is what I know so far, he said. Your family has contacted 3 different insurance departments requesting payout timelines. They called your employer's corporate office. They even contacted the external claims adjuster assigned to high-value cases. They said you were unlikely to survive and asked what paperwork they needed to prepare. The words made my skin crawl. They were preparing to bury me while I lay right here, listening. But he was not done. And the strangest part is that they quoted details only you or someone in HR would know. Beneficiary percentages, accumulated value adjustments, policy clause numbers. That caught my attention. I had never shared any of that with my family. Toby leaned closer. Maddie, someone accessed your employment records. Someone changed your beneficiary assignments years ago. My breath hitched. Not noticeably, I hoped. He lowered his voice even more, adjusting the angle of his body so anyone passing by would not overhear. The original beneficiary was a neutral trust, but when you were 21, a form was filed to change it. The new beneficiaries were listed as your mother, your father, and your brother. 50% to Ethan, 25% each to your parents. My heart began pounding. Toby continued. The signature on the file does not match your other records. The date overlaps with the month your employer transitioned to a new HR system. The change was logged by an old administrative ID that no longer exists. Someone slipped the form into the transfer stack. That someone, he said, tapping the armrest quietly, is almost certainly connected to your family. He paused to let that sink in. They have been waiting for this payout for years. The same family who abused me, stole from me, belittled me, broke me down as a child had laid a financial trap long before I ever had the chance to recognize it. Toby then placed a small folder on the bedside table. I cannot show you everything while we are in the ICU, but here is what matters right now. If the beneficiaries are involved in causing harm to you or attempting to profit from your death, the insurance company is legally required to withhold the payout. Meaning, he said slowly, if you live, they do not get a single cent. Not one. My heart steadied. Even through the fear, something warm flickered in my chest. Power. For the first time since the crash, the scales were not entirely against me. Toby continued more urgent now. Your survival is a direct threat to them, and if they are responsible in any way for the crash, the payout is void permanently. That is when everything aligned. The rental truck, the immediate push for a DNR, the pressure on the hospital ethics board, the lies about my supposed wishes, the intimidation, the testing of my reflexes, the impatience. They were not grieving, they were waiting, and I was not dying fast enough. Toby paused, watching my breathing. I know they think you are unresponsive. Use that. Do not let them know you understand what is happening. You must stay in this role until we have enough evidence to protect you legally and physically. As if on cue, footsteps swelled in the hallway. Harsh, familiar. Ethan's. Then Marla's sharp voice. I clenched my jaw, inwardly ready to slip back into my performance. Toby reacted quickly, standing and shifting toward the corner of the room. Dr. Devi moved beside me and adjusted my IV line to maintain the illusion. The door opened. My mother entered first, eyes sweeping the room with suspicion. What is he doing here? Her tone dripped with accusation. Toby smiled with polite professionalism. I represent a coworker of Maddie's. They asked me to bring her some personal updates. Inappropriate, my mother snapped. This is a family matter. Toby gave a small nod, but did not leave. Yes, a very serious one. Ethan stepped closer to my bed, observing me the way a boy examines a trapped insect. Still nothing. He sounded pleased. My father arrived last, clutching a stack of papers. He addressed Dr. Devi. We want another evaluation. We think it is time to revisit the DNR discussion. Toby cut in smoothly. A DNR conversation this early is extremely unusual for a patient showing stable neurological indicators. My mother glared at him. Her indicators are not enough. We know her better. Toby's reply was measured. Knowing someone personally does not replace medical criteria. That is when Ethan snapped. If she cannot respond, she cannot live independently. She would hate this. She would beg us to end it. Liar. I kept my eyes still, my breathing soft. My mother looked at Toby. You are not family. Leave. He gave me a brief glance, subtle but full of meaning. I will return. As he stepped out, he whispered just loud enough for me to hear. Hold on, Maddie. We are getting close. After they left, the recording device under my mattress captured every selfish, incriminating word they exchanged. And for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Not hope exactly. Not yet, but structure, strategy. A plan forming beneath the surface. I would make it out of this. And when I did, the truth would swallow every lie they had built. The next 48 hours inside the ICU felt like living inside a pressure chamber, each hour tightening around me, testing the limits of how long I could pretend to be helpless, while the people who were supposed to love me circled like wolves waiting for the weakest moment to strike. The recording device under my mattress continued to collect whispers, threats, arguments, and chilling fragments of conversations that exposed the truth of their intentions. But nothing prepared me for what they did next. It was late morning when the air shifted the way it does when someone hostile enters a room. My father walked in first, pacing with restless irritation. He looked around as though the walls were judging him. My mother followed, carrying her purse tightly against her side like she was about to catch a flight rather than visit her injured daughter. And Ethan came last, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes scanning the machines with unsettling focus. I shut my eyes halfway, letting my body melt into stillness, letting my breathing fall into a slow rhythm that suggested disconnection. My mother moved toward my bedside with a kind of forced gentleness that fooled no one. She leaned over me and whispered something that felt colder than the IV fluids dripping into my veins. "You are dragging this out. You always made things harder than they needed to be." I did not move. She clicked her tongue, annoyed. Then, glancing quickly toward the hallway, she reached out and tugged sharply on the cord connected to my cardiac monitor. Not enough to unplug it completely, but enough to cause the adhesive to pull painfully at my skin and the machine to react. The monitor beeped loudly. Within seconds, alarms echoed across the room. My heart spiked involuntarily from the pain. A nurse rushed in. "Ma'am, please step back. That is not safe." My mother widened her eyes in fake panic and pulled her hand back. It was loose. I was trying to help fix it. The nurse checked the machine, quickly securing the wire back in place. She gave my mother a sharp look, but said nothing else. Once the nurse left, my mother leaned down again. She whispered, "Just a few more days and this will all be done." I forced my breath to remain soft, steady, empty. My father stepped in, then shaking his head. "This is taking too long. We need something concrete." Ethan moved closer, pulling the blanket back just enough to reveal my left forearm. He pinched the soft skin brutally between his thumb and two fingers, hard. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I did not react. Not even a twitch. Ethan studied my face and smirked. Nothing. Just like before. He released my arm and let the blanket fall back in place. Then he muttered, "If she reacts, the doctor will say she is improving." "She cannot react." My father rubbed his jaw. "What if she suddenly wakes up? She was always stubborn." Ethan laughed under his breath. "If she wakes up, we are done, so relax." "She is not going anywhere." I felt my own pulse hammering in my chest, the machine responding with a subtle uptick. I willed it to calm. I needed to remain convincingly fragile. They needed to believe their plan was working. That was when something changed, something more dangerous, something I had not anticipated. My mother stepped closer to the head of my bed, pretending to adjust my pillow. She glanced toward the door again. Then, in one smooth motion, she reached for the tubing connected to my oxygen supply and tugged it sharply downward. Not enough to disconnect it entirely, but enough to tighten the cannula against the soft skin beneath my nose, enough to strain the connection point that fed air into my lungs. The machine reacted instantly. A warning sound chimed loud and sudden. My breath hitched, but I forced my body to remain limp. My mother made a theatrical gasp. Oh, no, she must have pulled it herself while shifting. She looked over her shoulder toward the hallway. "Someone help! Someone help!" The nurse from before came running back in. "What happened? Again!" My mother put a hand over her mouth in fake embarrassment. "She must be moving in her sleep or something. She keeps tugging on these things." The nurse's expression turned flat. She checked the tubing, carefully reattached a loose connection, and secured the monitor cable again. She glanced at me, and for a moment, I wondered if she suspected I was more aware than I appeared. But she said nothing and stepped out after making a note in my chart. My mother waited until the footsteps faded. "That is one way to speed this along," she whispered. My stomach twisted. She had just tried to simulate an accidental disconnect, something that could have compromised my breathing if left unattended. Something subtle, deniable, almost impossible to trace, and absolutely intentional. Ethan leaned over me, voice low and bitter. You are making this more complicated than it needs to be. I kept my eyes half closed, my mind racing locked between fear and fury. Dr. Devi walked in at that exact moment, her expression controlled, but her eyes sharp. Her gaze swept the room, skating over my family, then landing on me. She checked the monitors, then my oxygen line. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I need a moment alone with my patient," she said. My mother scoffed. "We are her family." Dr. Devi stood still, unblinking. "And I am her doctor. Step outside. Now." My father opened his mouth to argue, but Ethan touched his arm and nodded toward the hallway. They left reluctantly, exchanging whispers as they stepped out. The second the door closed, Dr. Devi exhaled sharply and leaned in close. "I saw what she did. She tugged your respiratory line, just enough to trigger a desaturation alarm. This is escalating. You need to stay still, but listen to me carefully. We are documenting everything. I am adding video surveillance to your hallway. The ethics board will be notified. And security staff will be rotated to ensure they always stand near your door when your family is here." I blinked once, slowly. Her voice softened. "I do not know how you are holding yourself so still, but keep doing it. The more they believe you cannot respond, the more reckless they will become." That sentence hit me with a heavy kind of clarity. My silence was not just a shield, it was bait, a trap for them to spring. By late afternoon, the hallway filled with tension again. My family returned with heavier footsteps, angrier whispers, more heated words. My father gestured toward the machines. "Something has to change," Ethan murmured. "Do not worry, it will happen. It has to." But the tipping point came when my mother leaned over me again, lowered her voice to a razor-thin whisper, and said something I will never forget. "You should have stayed quiet your whole life. It would have spared everyone trouble." She brushed a strand of hair from my forehead, a gesture that would look tender to anyone watching, but her eyes told the truth. She wanted me gone, and she wanted the money. All at once, I understood exactly what I was fighting for. Not just survival, not just justice, but proof. The kind of proof that would rip away every mask they had worn. The kind of proof that would make the world see who they really were. I lay still, breathing softly, letting them believe I was fading. They thought I was slipping away. They thought I was too weak to hear them. They thought $20 million made them untouchable. They were wrong. The next day began with a quiet so heavy it felt unnatural, like the air itself had paused to wait for something terrible to unfold. The ICU usually buzzed with activity every morning, but that day, everything outside my room seemed muted. Even the nurses spoke softer, their shoes tapping cautiously along the floor. I had learned to interpret silence as danger. It meant someone was planning something. And I was right. Around mid-morning, Ethan entered my room alone. No mother, no father, no angry whispers, no clicking heels or rustling papers. Just him. His quiet presence was somehow worse than any of the others combined. He pulled a chair next to my bed and sat down slowly, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped. His voice came low and steady, almost gentle. "Maddie." For a split second, I wondered if something had changed. If guilt had finally carved through whatever cold shield he had lived behind for years. If maybe, just maybe, the weight of what he was doing had cracked him open. He sighed and rubbed his palms together. Maybe we rushed this. Maybe we should wait a little longer. My breath hitched in my chest. It was almost imperceptible, but I felt it. That tiny surge of hope. He continued, "Maybe we do not need to push the DNR right now. I mean, she might—" He paused, shaking his head like he was struggling with his own conscience. "She might stabilize." My heart clenched. For one fragile second, I wanted to believe he meant it. I wanted to believe my brother, the same boy I once begged to protect me from our father, still had some sliver of humanity inside him. But then he exhaled sharply, stood up, and walked toward the wall. His body posture shifted. His shoulders rose. His jaw tightened. And with a sudden burst of frustration, he slammed his fist against the counter. "No. This is stupid." I was so close to breaking character that my fingers twitched under the blanket. He spun around, all softness wiped clean from his face. We are doing the DNR. Today. I do not care. I felt the betrayal hit me like a physical blow to the chest. He had pretended. He had pretended to hesitate, pretended to care, pretended to question his choices. It was all an act to see if I would respond. He had not come to express doubt. He had come to test me one more time. And when I did not react, he confirmed what he wanted. The illusion of a silent, deteriorating body was still intact. He muttered, "You are not waking up. You are not ruining this." When he left the room, I felt my hope collapse into something sharper and colder. It was no longer fear. It was fury. The kind that shakes the bones but steadies the mind. Within an hour, my mother and father returned with a hospital administrator. Their voices were tense, clipped, purposeful. They were pushing for an immediate ethics consultation. My mother insisted it was necessary. She claimed I had expressed clear wishes in the past. She claimed I hated the idea of being dependent. She claimed I had told her I would rather die than live with limitations. Every sentence was a lie. Every word sharpened the blade against my throat. Dr. Devi joined moments later, her expression composed but her posture tense. She stood at the foot of my bed like a shield, and for that I silently thanked her. The administrator suggested a conference room meeting to formally discuss the DNR request. The moment those words left his mouth, my mother nodded eagerly. "Yes, today. Please," as if she were scheduling a haircut. Within the hour, they transferred me not by stretcher, not by wheelchair, but still in my hospital bed to a private meeting room on the ICU floor. The fluorescent lights buzzed. A long rectangular table sat in the center. Seats were arranged in a semicircle. My bed was placed at the head of the room as though I were both guest of honor and corpse waiting to be signed off. My mother sat on the left, my father next to her, Ethan on the right. The hospital administrator sat across from them with a thick binder. A second physician, Dr. Keith Marino, joined as well. He was the one my family had been trying to reach for days. He had a reputation for signing DNRs when families insisted. He walked in with a folder, polite and detached, the kind of man who clipped emotions at the door. Dr. Devi stood behind my bed, hands clasped in front of her, every inch of her radiating defiance. The meeting began with the administrator asking my family to explain their reasoning. My mother leaned forward, wringing her hands with theatrical grief. She would not want this. She told me once she never wanted to be kept alive by machines. She hates hospitals. I fought to keep my breathing slow, steady. My father added, "Her prognosis is poor. There is no reason to drag this out." Dr. Devi answered immediately. "That is false. Her prognosis is strong. She is showing consistent neurological improvement." Ethan chimed in. "Improvement does not mean quality of life. She would not want to live like this." Dr. Marino finally spoke. "Has she shown any signs of meaningful responsiveness?" My father cut in. "None." My mother followed. "She is not there anymore. She is gone." And then Ethan delivered the line he had rehearsed. "She cannot hear you. She cannot understand you. She is just a shell of herself." I felt my chest tighten, but I forced my eyes to drift unfocused, as if staring through light rather than at it. The administrator cleared his throat. "Dr. Devi, do you disagree with the family's interpretation of her condition?" She stepped forward with a calm that cut the air like a scalpel. "Yes, completely." She looked directly at Dr. Marino. "Her neurological tests do not justify a DNR. In fact, her brain activity is strong. If given time treatment and rehabilitation, she has an excellent chance of full recovery." My father scoffed. "She is saying that because she is young and idealistic. She does not know our daughter. She would not want this." Dr. Devi's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed steady. "Wanting or not wanting something is irrelevant when based on false claims. Has anyone documented her wishes in writing?" Silence. "Has anyone provided medical evidence she would not recover?" More silence. "Has anyone proven she is medically terminal?" Silence again. Then Ethan leaned forward, lowering his voice like he believed he was about to deliver the final blow. "We know what she wanted. We are her family." The administrator looked at him carefully. "And yet every factual indicator contradicts your claims." That was when Ethan snapped. "Just sign the DNR. Sign it! We are done waiting." My mother grabbed his arm, shushing him. My father whispered something that sounded like "calm down," but Ethan was spiraling. If she wakes up, all of this is pointless. She would not want this. Sign it! I felt a chill crawl up my spine. His desperation was showing. His mask was slipping. Dr. Marino adjusted his glasses, flipping through my chart slowly. He said, "I need more evidence. Her vitals are stable. Her reflexes are inconsistent, but that is normal for her stage." He paused, tapping a page with his pen. "I cannot ethically sign a DNR without substantial justification." My family erupted. My mother's voice rose sharp and urgent. "You do not understand. She would hate this." My father jabbed a finger at the monitor next to me. "Look at her. Look at how weak she is." Ethan jumped in. "She is gone. Gone. End this. Now." For the first time since the meeting started, the room fractured. It was not calm anymore, not strategic, not rehearsed. It was chaotic, desperate, honest in its ugliness, and everyone saw it. The administrator closed the binder with a decisive snap. "We cannot sign a DNR. Not today. Not under these circumstances." My mother shot up from her chair. "This is ridiculous. We are her family. Our wishes matter." The administrator responded firmly. "Not more than medical facts do." The meeting adjourned with my family storming out, their fury radiating through the hallway like heat waves. As my bed was wheeled back to the ICU, I lay motionless, breathing softly, but inside my mind, sparked with fire. They had failed. They had shown their desperation. They had exposed themselves, and they would not stop. But neither would I. 2 days after the disastrous DNR meeting, Denver General discharged me from the ICU and transferred me to a private recovery suite under strict monitoring. Not because I was medically ready to leave intensive care, but because the hospital administration quietly acknowledged something no one wanted to say out loud. I was safer away from my own family. An internal memo, one I was never supposed to see but did thanks to a sympathetic nurse, described my relatives as displaying coercive, aggressive, and potentially harmful behavior toward the patient. Security escorts were assigned to every one of their visits moving forward. Visiting hours were restricted. All conversations were logged. And yet, even with these protections, the danger did not disappear. My family adjusted their tactics. They became quieter, more calculated, more subtle. But Toby and Dr. Debbie were already ahead of them. A plan was forming, one that required patience, precision, and the perfect audience. It would all come together at my company's quarterly internal compliance meeting, a gathering attended by department heads, legal counsel, senior investigators, auditors, and representatives from our external insurance partners. They had invited my family under the guise of beneficiary communication, something my mother had misunderstood as an opportunity to pressure the company into an early payout. She dressed for the moment like she was attending an award ceremony, wearing a pearl necklace she had never owned before. My father shaved for the first time in weeks. Ethan wore a suit that still had the price tag tucked into the sleeve. They thought this meeting was their chance. They had no idea it was their downfall. The morning of the meeting, 2 hospital staff members rolled my wheelchair down the long, sterile hallway flanked by security. I kept my blanket tucked around me, not because I was cold, but because I needed the illusion of fragility. My hair was brushed but not styled. My movements were slow, deliberate, and slightly stiff. I did not overdo it. A convincing performance always sits close to the truth. As we entered the conference center, my heart thudded once hard like a warning. The space was large, with a long, oval table and rows of chairs lining the back of the room. People murmured politely, unaware of the storm about to break around them. The walls were lined with framed awards recognizing investigative excellence and corporate ethics. How fitting! A hush fell as my family stepped inside behind me. My mother's posture straightened instantly, her expression shifting into practiced sorrow. My father touched the back of my wheelchair like he was comforting me, though he never touched me out of love. Ethan stood tall, scanning the room with the swagger of someone who believed he was smarter than everyone here. Toby sat near the front, a folder open before him. When he saw me, he gave a barely noticeable nod. It was time. The meeting began with formal introductions. The chief compliance officer explained they were reviewing a high-value case that had triggered unusual activity and required an official hearing. My mother leaned forward eagerly. Yes, well, thank you for letting us come. We know this has been so hard for everyone. The room was quiet for a moment, almost respectfully. She took that silence as approval. She continued, As you all know, our daughter is in very poor condition. She will never recover. Her life is essentially over. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from reacting. The chief compliance officer tilted his head slightly. Is that your medical opinion? My father jumped in. Her doctors told us she is not improving. They said she would never function independently again. Dr. Devi, who had been invited as a medical witness, rose slowly from her chair. That is categorically false. My mother stiffened, her smile cracking. Excuse me. Dr. Devi stepped forward. I am her attending physician. Her prognosis is good. She is improving steadily. She is responsive. She is cognitively present. She is speaking. Speaking. The word detonated in the center of the room. My mother's head snapped toward me so fast I almost heard her neck crack. My father blinked repeatedly. Ethan took one slow step back. She broke before I did. Speaking. She is speaking. He muttered it like a curse. My mother hissed at the doctor. You had no right to say that. The compliance officer folded his hands. Actually, she had every right. We need accurate medical information. Toby stood, finally moving to the center of the room. Thank you, doctor. Now let us address the purpose of today's meeting. He opened his folder, revealing several printed pages and a compact digital recorder. Over the past 10 days, he said the company has received multiple inquiries from the listed beneficiaries on Ms. Carter's $20 million life insurance policy. Multiple inquiries, he added, all made before her condition was medically assessed. My mother squared her shoulders. We were simply trying to prepare ourselves. My father nodded. We were acting responsibly. Toby continued. You also requested payout timelines, claim preparation checklists, and asked whether an early release was possible. He paused. That is not normal behavior for a family expecting recovery. Silence filled the room. Toby's tone did not change, but the temperature shifted. The tension pulsed like the hum of electricity. And then came the moment. The moment everything had been building toward. Toby lifted the recorder and pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room. Just leave it alone. She will not last. We need the money. My mother's voice followed. Pull the cord, Richard. I want my money. Then my father. 20 million fixes everything. My mother's face drained of color. My father staggered as though someone had punched him. Ethan glanced around wildly, searching for an exit that did not exist. Toby let the audio play a few seconds longer, then clicked it off. There were no outbursts, no shouts, no accusations, just a suffocating stillness as 30 witnesses processed the truth. The compliance officer broke the silence. Ms. Carter, would you like to say anything? The room shifted as every head turned toward me. My family stared at me like they were looking at a ghost. Until now, I had remained exactly as they expected, still, silent, small, but not anymore. I placed my hands on the armrests of my wheelchair. Slowly, deliberately, I pushed myself upright. The room gasped. I steadied myself, then rose to my feet. I used the chair for a balance, but I stood. I faced my family, and I spoke. I heard everything. The words echoed like a strike of thunder. My mother shook her head rapidly. No, no. You are lying. You could not have. I continued, my voice thin but unwavering. I heard every word you said over my bed, every lie, every threat, every plan to let me die. My father reached for the table, his fingers trembling. Maddie, you do not understand. We were scared, terrified. You would never want to live like that. I took one step forward. I have never said anything like that in my life. My mother lunged. You are doing this to punish us. You are twisting things. You always twisted things. That was when Ethan snapped entirely. Enough! His voice broke. His veneer shattered. He slammed his fist against the wall. So what if we talked about it? You were dying. You were useless. There was no point in dragging this out forever. The room exploded in murmurs of disgust. Toby raised a hand, motioning for quiet. "Thank you for your honesty, Ethan." The compliance officer lifted his binder. "Based on the evidence presented, the listed beneficiaries are hereby suspended pending a full criminal investigation. The policy will not be paid out to any of you." Several people gasped. My mother staggered backward. "What? What do you mean suspended? That money is ours." Toby corrected her. "No, it is not. And because you attempted to interfere with her medical care, you are now subjects of an insurance fraud investigation." Ethan lunged toward the table, shouting, "She is lying! She set us up! She tricked us!" "You tricked yourselves," Toby replied calmly. "Every word you said is on that recording." The compliance officer closed the binder with finality. "Police have been notified. They will arrive shortly." My mother screamed a raw, guttural sound. My father collapsed into a chair, shaking his head over and over. Ethan turned toward the door but froze when two officers stepped inside. He looked back at me, hatred and panic mixing in his eyes. "You will regret this." I straightened. "I already regret ever trusting you." The officers approached them, reading formal charges. My mother was still yelling when they handcuffed her. My father kept repeating, "This cannot be happening." Ethan tried to pull away once, but he did not get far, and I stood there weak, trembling but upright, watching as the truth finally dragged them into the light. Betrayal had brought us to this moment. Justice would carry us the rest of the way. The moment my family was escorted out of the conference room in handcuffs, it felt like the air shifted, not lighter, not triumphant, just different, as if the universe had paused to acknowledge that something irreversible had begun. The officers guided them through the hallway where employees, legal staff, and senior investigators stood frozen in disbelief. Some whispered, some shook their heads, others simply stared in stunned silence. I stayed standing for as long as my recovering body allowed, gripping the back of my wheelchair until my knuckles turned white. Toby placed a steadying hand near my arm, not touching, but close enough that I knew support was there if I needed it. "You did well," he murmured. "They showed everyone exactly who they are." I exhaled slowly and let myself sit back down, my legs trembling from the effort. But the adrenaline had not finished its course. Not even close. By the time security rolled me back into the conference center's adjoining waiting room, uniformed officers were already speaking to internal legal counsel. At the same time, the building receptionist rushed in and spoke in hurried tones. "There are federal agents downstairs." My pulse fluttered. Federal. I knew enough from my work in fraud that local police handle immediate arrests, but when insurance fraud crosses into high-value territory, especially when paired with potential homicide attempts, another agency often enters the scene. Toby straightened. "The FBI," I whispered. He nodded once. "They move fast when the numbers are high and the circumstances are violent." My heart thudded once hard. Within minutes, 2 agents in dark suits entered the room. They carried the presence of people who walk into chaos for a living and restore order through methodical force. Agent Ramirez introduced himself calmly, sliding an ID across the table. Agent Warren did the same. Both had the careful eyes of professionals who had already studied the situation long before stepping inside. They sat across from me, maintaining a respectful distance, as if aware of how fragile I still was. "Ms. Carter," Agent Ramirez began, "we have been briefed by Denver PD and your company's internal team. We are opening a formal investigation into attempted insurance fraud conspiracy to commit financial exploitation and potential involvement in your motor vehicle accident." My breath tightened. "So fast," Agent Warren added. "Your testimony is crucial, but we will not push you physically or emotionally beyond what your doctor allows." Toby nodded beside me, signaling that he would intervene if needed. I swallowed hard. "I will tell you whatever I can." Agent Ramirez leaned forward slightly. "First, we need to ask a difficult question. Do you believe your family intended for you to die?" The words were not cruel. They were necessary. They landed with the weight of truth, heavy and final. I took a slow breath. "Yes, absolutely yes." My throat tightened. They thought I could not hear them. They talked about the money. They tried to disconnect things. Several times. Agent Warren exchanged a glance with his partner. We suspected that based on the audio recording. But hearing it from you helps us establish intent. I nodded. My voice came out steadier than I expected. My mother pulled on my oxygen line. Twice. My brother pinched me to test whether I could react. My father kept asking about the timeline for the DNR. Agent Ramirez wrote notes with quick, precise strokes. Dr. Devi has also submitted a report documenting observed interference with your medical equipment, and the recording you provided is damning. Toby placed a folder on the table. We also have the results of our internal investigation into the beneficiary changes from years ago. Agent Warren opened the folder and scanned the pages. This is extremely compelling. It demonstrates premeditation and a long-term plan. He closed it gently. And a forensic review of the rental truck confirms your brother rented it using his own card that further supports an orchestrated attempt. I felt a chill. Hearing it framed in investigative language made everything sharper, more real. My family had not just considered letting me die. They had constructed a plan around it. They had spent years preparing. Agent Ramirez stood. Ms. Carter, we will need a formal recorded statement. But for now, please rest. You are under federal protection as of this moment. My eyes widened. Federal what? Protection, he repeated. A security detail will monitor your hospital room. Your family is barred from all contact, and they will remain in custody until charges are formally filed. My lungs expanded with a breath I had been holding since the accident. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you so much. The agents nodded respectfully and left the room to coordinate with local law enforcement. Toby leaned back in his chair once the door closed. I know this is overwhelming, but you are finally safe. Safe. It was a strange word. A foreign word. One I had not felt since childhood. That night, I was taken back to the hospital in a secured transport vehicle. 2 officers accompanied me. One rode in the front, another in the back. For the first time, the sirens outside the windows did not terrify me. They reassured me. In my new private suite, security stood outside the door. A nurse named Leah checked my vitals gently and gave me water with a straw. You are stronger than you look, she whispered. Stronger than they ever realized. I drifted into sleep that night without fear of someone pulling at my tubes or standing over me whispering about money. It was the first peaceful sleep in weeks. The next morning began with news that shook even me. Ethan had broken during interrogation. Not fully, not with remorse, but with anger. He admitted to renting the truck, not to cause harm, he claimed, but to scare me into coming home. A grotesque excuse. A lie that collapsed under the weight of every detail. He had also admitted to accessing my HR files when I was 21 through a friend who worked as a temporary clerical assistant. He insisted he did not know the accident would be that bad. The FBI did not believe him. Then came the second blow. My father confessed that he had encouraged Ethan to go through with the plan because the family needed the payout. My mother admitted to calling the insurance company but denied any intent to harm me. She said I only wanted what was fair. Fair. As if $20 million justified orchestrating my death. By midday, the charges were finalized. Insurance fraud, conspiracy, attempted negligent homicide, medical interference, and obstruction. The local police transferred them to a federal holding facility. Toby visited later that afternoon, sitting beside my bed like someone who had weathered every storm with me. The case is strong, he said. They will not walk away from this. I nodded. Relief flooded my body so intensely it almost hurt. What happens now? Toby folded his hands. Now comes the part where justice does not need to be loud. It just needs to be thorough. Over the following days, the FBI collected evidence from my hospital room, my family's phone records, financial documents, and the rental car agency. Everything aligned. Everything pointed in one direction. Everything made sense now. The accident was not just an accident. It was a choice, a plan, a betrayal measured not in moments, but in dollars. And the law had finally wrapped its hands around all of it. They had taken my childhood. They had taken my peace. They had tried to take my life, but now the law would take everything from them, and I would live to see every step unfold. The downfall of my family did not happen all at once. It unfolded piece by piece, like a structure that had been rotting from the inside for years and finally buckled under its own weight. The FBI investigation accelerated everything, but the truth was that their collapse had begun long before the agents ever arrived. They had lived for years on borrowed money, borrowed lies, borrowed identities, and the illusion that they could manipulate the world the same way they manipulated me. Once the investigation started, those illusions evaporated. Within a week, Ethan was the first to break publicly. His confession to renting the truck became headline news across Denver once the charges were announced. Local stations ran segments about the $20 million case and the attempted insurance fraud involving a high-value corporate policy. Ethan's mugshot spread across social media, his once confident smirk replaced with hollow, desperate eyes. The community that had adored him in high school recoiled instantly. His old football coach told reporters he never thought Ethan could be capable of such cruelty. His former co-workers at the auto shop where he occasionally helped out said they sensed something off but never imagined this. He was charged with attempted negligent homicide conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, identity misuse, and obstruction. Bail was denied. My father's collapse followed quickly. Richard Carter had always worn his pride like a badge, even when his debts swallowed him whole. But when agents searched the house, they uncovered a stack of unpaid loans, gambling markers from illegal operations in Pueblo, and evidence that he had tried to liquidate assets the night before the conference room arrest. He had known the investigation was coming. He had tried to run financially, even if he could not run physically. Under interrogation, he cracked. He admitted to encouraging Ethan to take advantage of the situation and said he believed the payout would solve everything. His arrest shook what little remained of his reputation. The landlord, who had rented to them for years, publicly expressed shock. Their neighbor said she always heard shouting from the house but never imagined violence directed toward a daughter. Even the members of my father's regular poker circle distanced themselves overnight. He was charged with conspiracy, financial exploitation, and aiding in attempted negligent homicide. The judge denied his bail as well. But the collapse that hit hardest was my mother's. Marla had always been careful, always calculated, always managing the public image of our family like a fragile glass sculpture. She played the role of the doting mother whenever eyes were on her, but the moment the audio of her voice leaked her cold, merciless whisper, saying, "Pull the cord, Richard. I want my money," any illusion of who she pretended to be disintegrated. She became in a single moment a symbol of greed and maternal betrayal. The media picked it up instantly. Talk shows debated the psychology of mothers who harm their children. Headlines used words like chilling and monstrous. She denied everything at first, claiming the audio was manipulated. But when the FBI revealed a second recording one Janine the nurse had secretly captured after noticing my mother's behavior, the entire room heard her whisper, "You should have stayed quiet your whole life." The courtroom fell silent when that audio was played. Her attorneys stopped trying to argue innocence and shifted to damage control. She was charged with attempted medical interference conspiracy and participation in insurance fraud. Unlike Ethan and my father, she was granted bail but under strict supervision and a restraining order preventing any contact with me. The damage extended beyond the arrests. Their house was seized and listed for auction to pay off outstanding debts and legal fees. Their vehicles were repossessed. The bank froze multiple accounts. Their remaining friends disappeared one by one, unwilling to be associated with such infamy. People they had known for decades refused to speak with them. Even extended relatives from my mother's side issued public statements distancing themselves. The Carter name became a stain, a warning, a cautionary tale about greed and cruelty. While they fell apart, I continued to heal. Slowly, painfully, but with a clarity I had never known as a child. Each day in the recovery wing, I walked a little farther down the hallway. Each session with the physical therapist helped rebuild not just muscle, but strength of identity. Nurses treated me with a respect and protectiveness that felt foreign at first, but eventually became comforting. One morning, I overheard two of them speaking quietly outside my door. "That girl is tougher than she looks. She survived more than just a crash." The other nurse replied softly, "She survived her own family, and that is harder." Hearing that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff and realizing I had learned how to fly without knowing it. By the time the preliminary hearings began, I was strong enough to attend with Toby by my side. The courtroom was cold, lined with wooden benches and fluorescent lights. My family was brought in wearing orange jumpsuits. My mother's eyes searched for me with a mixture of disbelief and rage. My father looked small, smaller than I had ever seen him. Ethan stared at the floor, jaw clenched, refusing to look anywhere but straight ahead. The judge listed the charges with clinical precision: conspiracy, fraud, attempted negligent homicide, medical interference, identity misuse. When the prosecutor spoke of motive, she did not embellish. She simply read the transcripts of their conversations. And when she described my injuries and the attempts to hasten my death, the courtroom felt as though it stopped breathing. The district attorney's office received hundreds of letters from the public expressing sympathy for me and outrage toward them. The judge scheduled separate trials for each defendant, but made one thing clear: these were not misunderstandings. These were not emotional decisions made under stress. These were deliberate acts rooted in greed. The beginning of the end came faster than any of them expected. Ethan's attorney attempted a plea deal, but the prosecutor refused anything light. Richard's lawyer tried to argue diminished capacity due to gambling addiction, but the evidence of intentional planning crushed the argument instantly. Marla's attorney attempted to frame her as manipulated by her husband and son, but the recordings made that angle impossible. One by one, their defenses fell apart just like everything else. Their lives had been built on lies, and once the truth surfaced, the structure collapsed without resistance. And for the first time in my life, I felt something I never thought I would feel in connection to them: closure. Not forgiveness, not peace, but the cold, steady certainty that the worst was behind me. They had tried to end my life for $20 million. Instead, they lost everything they had ever used to hurt me. And I was still standing. Healing is not a straight line. It is a series of moments, some small and almost invisible, others sharp enough to cut through the noise of everything that came before. For me, healing began not with forgiveness, but with distance. The morning after the preliminary hearings, Toby walked into my hospital room with 2 folders. One held legal documents, notices, updates, motions, the noise of the justice system grinding forward. The other held a single sheet of paper titled Recommended Relocation and Recovery Plan. I laughed when I saw it, even though I barely had the energy to stand on my own some days. "You think I need a plan, Toby?" He leaned against the door, arms crossed. "I think you need freedom." And for the first time in my life, I realized he was right. I had never lived anywhere without the shadow of the Carter name hanging over me. Even when I moved to Denver, it followed me through phone calls, debts, manipulations, requests, disguised as obligations. But after everything that happened, I understood that distance was not running away. It was survival. 2 weeks later, once I was cleared medically, I packed up the few belongings I owned and left Denver behind. I drove south through winding stretches of highway, past mountains that felt ancient and indifferent, until I crossed into New Mexico. Santa Fe greeted me with quiet streets, clay-colored buildings, and a horizon so wide it felt like an invitation. I found a small adobe-style apartment at the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but sunlight spilled across the walls every morning, warming everything it touched. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt warmth without fear attached to it. My recovery routine became sacred. Mornings were for walking slow at first, just around the block with a cane. Every day, I pushed a little farther, letting the dry desert air fill my lungs. Afternoons were for physical therapy. My therapist, Elena, had a gentle but firm presence. She never asked about my family, never pushed me to talk, but she always knew when I needed an extra moment to breathe before continuing. Evenings were for rebuilding the parts of me that had nothing to do with muscles or injuries. I read books about trauma recovery, journaled until my hand cramped, and spent long hours sitting on the small balcony outside my bedroom, staring at the sunset until the sky burned orange. Slowly, I began to remember what it felt like to exist without bracing for someone's rage. 3 months into my recovery, I received a letter from my employer. The company's board had reviewed the situation and ruled that due to the attempted fraud by my listed beneficiaries, the insurance policy would not be paid out to my family. But there was more. As part of an internal ethics clause, I was entitled to retain an emergency survivor benefit due to the attempted criminal exploitation of my policy. I stared at the letter, rereading the words. For the first time, I felt like the universe had given something back. Not because I needed the money, but because someone acknowledged that I deserved better. That acknowledgement seeded the next phase of my healing. I did not want to disappear. I wanted to build something that would outlive the cruelty of the Carters. Toby visited Santa Fe shortly after. He found me in a local cafe, laptop open, drafting the beginnings of an idea. "You starting a business or writing a book?" he teased. "Neither," I said. "I am starting something my family would have despised." I showed him the draft, a proposal for a nonprofit fund dedicated to helping patients who were pressured into DNR decisions they did not want or understand. The Emergency Ethics Fund. Toby stared at the page and nodded slowly. "You know this is going to change lives, right?" That was the point. The fund launched quietly at first, using the survivor benefit money and several small donations from people who had followed my case. Dr. Devi became one of the first advisory partners. She sent a message the day the website went live. "Proud of you. The world needs more people willing to say no when others look away." The first case we took involved a 49-year-old woman in Phoenix whose family had pushed for comfort care despite the doctor's recommendation for surgery with a high chance of success. She survived after we intervened. The second case involved an elderly man whose son tried to pull his oxygen tubing to stage a rapid decline for early inheritance. We helped the nursing staff document everything and ensured he was transferred to a safer facility. Each victory chipped away at the weight I had carried for so long. I learned something important in those months. Healing is not about forgetting what happened. It is about reclaiming the parts of yourself that were taken. And for me, the biggest part of that reclamation was choosing who I allowed into my life. Toby visited often, and our friendship grew into something deeper, not romantic, but grounding. He became the one person I trusted fully, the anchor in a new life built on honest intentions. Dr. Devi visited once as well. When she stepped into my apartment, she took a long breath and smiled. "This feels like you," she said. "Peaceful, warm, alive." Her approval meant more than I expected. She had been there in my darkest moments, the quiet guardian who saw what my family really was long before I fully understood it myself. Months passed. Seasons changed. I began hiking the trails outside Santa Fe once my strength returned. I painted for the first time since childhood, letting colors replace words when emotions felt too heavy. I adopted a small rescue dog, a terrified beagle mix, that shook every time someone raised a hand near her. We healed together. On the 1-year anniversary of the accident, I stood alone on a quiet overlook, the wind pulling gently at my hair. I thought about the girl I had been. The one who took responsibility for everyone. The one who believed love required sacrifice. The one who thought family meant loyalty at any cost. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone sharper, stronger, and finally free. Healing had required breaking, but it had also required rebuilding with intention. I was no longer the daughter they tried to erase. I was the survivor who refused to stay silent. And in that silence of the desert, overlooked with the horizon stretching endlessly before me, I understood something with absolute clarity. The world had not ended when my family betrayed me. My life had begun. The thing about closure is that it rarely arrives with fanfare. It does not knock loudly or announce itself in triumphant echoes. It comes quietly, often disguised as an ordinary moment when something inside you finally exhales. For me, closure began on an afternoon when the sun hung low over Santa Fe, and my mailbox held an envelope with handwriting I knew too well. Ethan's handwriting. I stared at it for a long time before opening it, the rough edge of the paper scraping against my thumb. Inside was a single sheet. No excuses. No manipulation. Just 7 words. "I am sorry. I wish I had been better." The breath I released trembled at the edges, but I felt no urge to write back. Regret was a beginning, not redemption, and what he had done required far more than regret. I folded the letter once, placed it in a drawer I rarely opened, and walked away. Not in anger, not in bitterness. Just an acknowledgement that some relationships end long before the final break. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from a number I did not recognize. It was my mother. Her voice sounded smaller, thinner, as though the walls she had built her identity on had finally crumbled. "Maddie, it is your mom. I know you do not owe me anything, but I thought you should know I joined a support group for families who abused their children. They say the first step is to admit what you did. So here it is. I hurt you. I hurt you badly. I do not expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to hear me say it." I stood still in my kitchen, the desert wind whistling softly outside the open window. Hearing her voice brought no warmth, no longing, no memory worth holding. She was simply another person who had lost access to me by her own choices. I deleted the voicemail. My father never called. He sent one letter from the correctional treatment facility he had been assigned to after sentencing. It was a messy letter, rambling, the ink smudged as though he had wiped his eyes while writing or spilled water in a rush. It spoke of a man unraveling, confronting the monster he had become. He wrote that he was receiving therapy for gambling disorder, that he had nightmares about the ICU room, that he understood now what it meant to choose money over a heartbeat. At the end, he wrote, "I hope the world is kinder to you than I ever was." I read it once and tucked it into the same drawer as Ethan's letter. Healing meant not letting their words define my next step. Life slowly built itself into something whole. I woke early in the mornings, walked my dog along sunlit trails, and felt my lungs fill easily again. The Emergency Ethics Fund grew faster than I anticipated. More families reached out each month, seeking help navigating medical decisions, battling hospital administrations, or reporting suspicious behaviors. We funded treatments, hired advocates, and created new partnerships with patient safety groups across the Southwest. One afternoon, I received a message from Dr. Davy. "Turn on the news." I grabbed the remote, switching to a national channel just as a segment aired about new legislation being considered in 3 states. They called it the Carter Amendment after my case, a proposed law requiring all DNR discussions within the first 72 hours of admission to be recorded and reviewed by a special oversight committee. Watching it unfold on national television, seeing lawmakers cite my story as a catalyst for reform was surreal. Not because I wanted recognition, but because I wanted no one else to experience what I had survived. Later that summer, I received an invitation to speak at a medical ethics conference in Boston. For a long moment, I stared at the message, considering. The conference was in the same city where my life had nearly ended, the same type of ballroom where I had exposed my family, the same world I once believed would swallow me whole. I declined the invitation kindly. A person can return to the past only so many times before it stops being healing and starts being a trap. Instead, I sent a recorded statement about the importance of patient autonomy and safety. The feedback was overwhelming, and the foundation received its largest wave of donations to date. Life felt stable in a way I had never known. Months passed. The seasons shifted from blistering summer to the soft golden hues of autumn. One evening, I sat on the small balcony with a blanket draped around my shoulders, the desert sky fading into twilight. My dog curled beside me, breathing softly. For the first time, I let myself look backward without pain sharpening the memory. I thought of the little girl I had been, the teenager dragged downstairs, the young woman dismissed and controlled, the ICU patient waiting for her family to decide whether she lived or died. And then I thought of the woman I was now, independent, whole, found, not because life handed me strength, but because I carved it out of every moment that tried to break me. My story did not end in that hospital bed. It began there. Because surviving betrayal is not just about living through it. It is about reclaiming the narrative afterward. That night, as the last line of sunlight dissolved behind the red hills, I whispered a quiet truth to myself. They told me to just leave it alone. If I had listened, I would not be here. A few weeks later, I posted the full story to my nonprofit's website, not with bitterness, not with accusation, with purpose, and with hope that someone reading it would find the courage to fight for their own life when the people closest to them failed to. At the bottom of the post, I added a message. Not for sympathy, not for validation, but for connection. Because no one should walk through betrayal alone. The message read, "If your own family ever betrayed your trust, I want you to know you are not alone. Tell me where you are watching from. Tell me what happened to you. And most importantly, tell me what you would have done. Justice is not always loud, but your voice can be." And with that, my story was complete. When a story like mine ends, it is easy to close the screen and move on, but I want to leave you with something deeper, something that stays with you long after the video finishes. If you have ever faced a moment where the people who were supposed to protect you became the ones who hurt you, I want you to know that you are not alone. Maybe your family tried to take control of your life, your medical decisions, your finances, or your future. Maybe you grew up in a house where love was conditional, where loyalty was demanded but never returned, where every day felt like walking on glass. Maybe someone tried to silence you, dismiss you, or convince you that your pain was exaggerated, imagined, or inconvenient. Or maybe, like me, you survived something that should have destroyed you, and you are still learning how to breathe without fear. I want to hear from you. I truly do. Tell me where you are watching from, whether it is a quiet town in the Midwest, a farm in Texas, a small apartment in New York, or a porch overlooking the mountains in Montana. Tell me your age, because every season of life carries its own battles and its own strength. Tell me what you would have done if you were in my shoes. Would you have fought back the moment you woke up, or would you have waited until you gathered the proof? Would you have confronted your family or walked away forever without looking back? Your perspective matters. Your story matters. Someone scrolling through these comments might be facing something you survived 20 years ago, and your words could be the one thing that helps them find the courage to stand up for themselves. And if this story made you angry, if it made you shake your head or clench your fists or whisper, "Not her own family," then tell me why. Tell me which part hit closest to home. Maybe you experienced medical betrayal. Maybe someone tried to pressure you into signing something you did not fully understand. Maybe you watched a loved one fight for every breath while others made decisions that were not theirs to make. Share that moment. This space is yours. This comment section is not just for reactions. It is a place for people who have lived through the unthinkable to find community in the middle of a digital world that often feels too fast to care. So before you scroll away, take a moment and speak. Where are you watching from? How old are you? And what would you have done if your own family tried to decide whether you lived or died? I am listening. And so is everyone else who has ever survived betrayal.